You bought me an Oura ring for Christmas, and now I'm using it to sort of track my sleep.
Don't you wish that the Oura ring would tell you when you said something socially awkward or inappropriate? Don't you wish it had a feedback mechanism for personality type?
You mean other than the feedback mechanism of like the awkward silence and everybody looking at me and blinking? Yeah.
Well,
An Oura ring that said, this is how you didn't read the room. While it's kind of a horrifying thought, yeah, it'd probably be pretty useful information. We're all pre-wired to pay attention to different things, sensing and intuition. If you're missing one of these, it means you're missing a reality. That's when the problem shows up. You're going to have pain or pressure. Why do I keep making the same mistake? Or what am I missing?
Hi, welcome back to the Personality Hacker Podcast. My name is Joe Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
So, Antonia, have you ever had this happen where one of your muscles in your body is twitching? Like right now, my calf muscle's been twitching like crazy. It'll like cramp up and twitch a little bit. And I learned that when my muscles do that, often it's a vitamin deficiency. I might need potassium or I might need calcium. So I'll usually go take like a supplement if my muscles twitch, or like sometimes my eye will twitch. And I've learned that that's a signal from my body that I need some sort of mineral, vitamin, some kind of nutrients in my diet. And I think that's a really powerful thing that we humans have figured out, to be able to use our bodies as a feedback mechanism for the things that we need.
For the nutrients that we're lacking.
Yeah.
Yep.
I suspect our ancestors had more discretion when they felt hungry about what type of hunger they had, possibly.
Yeah.
Because they weren't just throwing like synthetic, overly done, sugary, salty things. Like they might have been, because I've noticed that the more I cut out like bad foods for myself, I start to eat something. I'm like, I don't think I want that. That's not what I was actually craving. Like my body's on the hunt for some kind of a nutrient that it's looking for. I bet our palates and our bodies had a lot of feedback loops in the past to help us eat better, or at least get the nutrients we needed.
Well, and our food is really complicated now. You know, in times past, we're like, we ate an egg we found, and a mushroom we found, and some berries we found, and the meat that we hunted. And now our food is really complicated, you know, sort of mixes of all of those things.
Processed.
Yeah.
Factory made.
and on the plus side, that's good because we get a lot of nutrients at the same time, as long as your food is nutrient dense, right? As long as that's represented. But yeah, I can appreciate that. I mean, I don't know that to be true because I'm only thinking about it now for the first time that you suggested it, but I bet there was more discretion around like what one was hungry for.
We have an INTP friend who will go in to get blood work done regularly, to not just use his body as a metric to know what he needs, but to actually see how all his levels and all his blood work results, I guess. I don't know the right words to say about them, but
all
like,
the things that are measured by blood work.
Yeah, like, you know, the INTP mind of like measuring all this and like dialing it in, optimizing. He like actually gets his own blood work done outside of a doctor or a hospital, and has learned how to interpret the data to make adjustments in his diet and his workout routine and how he lives his life.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting. Like modern science, modern medicine has brought to us the ability to kind of take control of that if we actually wanted to. We have a lot of options in front of us. Now, most people just go to a doctor and do whatever they say. That's what I do. I don't get my blood drawn. I hate getting my blood drawn. So I'm like, ugh. But I can understand that. And it's like, so we have feedback mechanism at the lowest level, like a cramp in our leg,
right?
May signal potassium or calcium deficiency. Or if you have blood work, you're like, oh, actually, I do need calcium or this or some other nutrient I'm not getting in my, maybe my blood pressure's high, or I've got cholesterol, or it tells us a lot of things about our bodies and what we need.
Yeah. We have other mechanisms too. I mean, you bought me an Oura ring for Christmas.
Yeah.
And now I'm using it to sort of track my sleep patterns and what it is I need more of or less of, or why, you know, when I'm waking up, and so then it can give me, that's like a feedback mechanism that allows me to sort of optimize my habits.
Don't you wish that the Oura ring would tell you when you said something socially awkward or inappropriate? Like, don't you wish it had a feedback mechanism for personality type? Would that be useful to you?
You mean other than the feedback mechanism of like the awkward silence and everybody looking at me and blinking? Yeah.
Well, but that's just like, that's like the calf muscle.
That's the calf muscle
twitching, right? You're like, I don't know. Is that potassium? Is that calcium? What did I do wrong? Did I say the wrong thing? Did I do it the wrong time? Did I say the wrong person? Like, what's the...
An Oura ring that said, this is how you didn't read the room.
Yeah. This is how you didn't read the room. It like breaks it down for you to know and understand it.
While it's kind of a horrifying thought, yeah, it'd probably be pretty useful information.
I would love some type of a tracker to tell me like which paperwork I need to file when. And like, I could see technology being very useful to cover some of what I would consider deficiencies or at least uncertainties in my personality.
Yeah.
So taking that example of using our bodies at the base level to get an idea, hey, I might need a nutrient or something my body might need, vitamins or minerals, all the way to blood work in a sophisticated way. We don't have blood work for personality types. There's no real mechanism to tell us, like we can't take blood work and be like, well, I'm deficient in this area of my life. We have to use our self-reporting and our experience and our understanding of how we're naturally wired to come to the world to give us that feedback to make the adjustments.
Yes, exactly.
So taking the idea of vitamin deficiencies today, I thought we could talk about personality types through the lenses, almost as if your personality type it's giving you some nutrients. It's having you attuned to certain realities of the world, and it's feeding you very well there. But there's other parts of reality, and everybody struggles with this, it's just which part of reality do you struggle with, that you're not as attuned to. And in some ways, some of those areas of life might be completely missing to you. You might be missing large sections of them, and you're missing out on a bunch of learning, opportunity, understanding about the self, about others, about a good life you could be living. So we can almost call them personality vitamin deficiencies, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. The last couple episodes we did a 2-part series on how cognitive functions keep us safe and what they keep us safe from. Like, introverted thinking or accuracy keeps us safe from being duped. Introverted intuition keeps us safe from, sort of falling victim to unseen forces. Like,
or lack of meaning.
Right. Or lack of meaning or whatever. Like, it's like each of these things helps keep us safe from something that could be a real threat. I mean, lack of meaning, I don't know if that one's like considered a real threat, but being manipulated by unseen forces certainly could be, right? And so when we were talking about the thing that keeps us safe from, what I'm hearing you say is, and not only do these functions keep us safe from bad ends, but also on a moment-to-moment or day-to-day level, almost like the body's feedback mechanism of when you're missing a nutrient, they can also keep us just generally healthy. In Personality Life Path, I think the last couple times that we've, when we talk about opening up a new course for Personality Life Path, we go through, like a presentation or a webinar that talks about what's in the course and, the kinds of ways that we're looking at it and our philosophy around all of this. And we've mentioned that those 8 functions are like vital signs for your life. Like when we tune into each of them during the Personality Life Path program, during PLP, we talk about our relationship to each because we want to know what our health is in that. We want to know whether or not we're overdoing it, we're underdoing it, that we have some sort of natural resistances, or not even natural, like maybe they're pre-wired natural resistances, or they could be learned resistances. And what things are we maybe over-relying on because we don't have any resistances to those? And so when you go through all 8 functions in terms of an audit, like we do in that program, a lot of earth gets turned over, right? A lot of like ahas happen. It's like, oh, I'm kind of missing this whole aspect of my life, right? I'm not tuned into it. And it's very easy at entry level understanding of type to go, and I don't want to, and I don't care because that's not my function. Like that's not my thing. And while there's no expectation or anticipation that we will be equally good at all 8 functions, because that's not even a thing. It's just, that's what type is a part of understanding it is the cost of specialization and recognizing what that means. We need to at least have a relationship with all of them. And I like this idea of using feedback mechanisms in our life to tell us, are we missing a little of this nutrient? Are we missing a little of this vitamin? Yeah. Because when that happens, it's like, oh, I don't have great sleep. Maybe I should take some magnesium. It's not like I'm all magnesium all the time now. Like that's the only thing I care about is magnesium. It's like, no, I just need a little bit of it in order to help me sleep. Or yeah, I'm starting to get muscle twitches or like muscle cramps. I probably should increase the potassium. Right? It's not like I'm just going to do nothing but eat bananas, avocados, and potatoes from now on. It's like we don't have to double down on that level. We just have to make sure that we're getting enough of it to have a balanced diet and not have our body, sort of give us those frequent symbols that we're missing that thing. Yeah. So I think when we look at all of these functions, we can ask ourselves, how would we know? Like what's our symbol? What's our feedback mechanism that we might be missing if not, like double down, we're missing all of it. But like, no, we're missing some. Like maybe we should just incorporate a bit of this into our life so we can, so we don't have to feel as much of the pain of the loss.
Yeah. Just in case you're new or you're like, what are you, cognitive functions? I tuned into personality to hear about personality types. What's this all about? These are the building blocks of personality. And this is where personality originated with Carl Jung over 100 years ago, developed 8 cognitive functions, basically mental process of how we learn information. There's 4 of the ways we learn or perceive our world. And there are 4 ways we judge the criteria that we perceive or how we make decisions. If you want to learn more about how the framework works and the CAR model that we use to organize this and apply it toward your personality type, if you're listening, because all the 4 letters in the Myers-Briggs system have functions, cognitive functions underneath them. And to find out what yours are and understand how this all works, head over to personalityhacker.com/CAR model. You can read more about the CAR model we use and understand a little bit more with these functions and how they relate to your specific type. But we're going to go deeper into some of this, assuming you've already checked that reference out or you know what functions are. We're going to go into the perceiving functions today and talk about these. Mm-hmm. There's 4 of them. So these are the ways that we take in information or perceive our world. This is how we understand a worldview of what we're looking at, what we're focusing on in life. And all humans are a little different in this. We have different ways that we approach perceiving our world. It's important to know this because how you perceive the world, often it's the first line before you have to even make a decision about it. And we'll talk about that on the next episode, how we're going to make decisions around these things we perceive. But today we want to focus on perception at the gate. Let's start with, by the way, I'll just make this comment too. This really comes to head if you work with a company, like a corporate company or a business. If you go into a business, because we've done work with corporations or companies before, if you go into business, it's very easy to spot some of these energies that are missing in a business because each person might represent it. It's kind of, you can see big gaps when a team may not have this represented because teams tend to cluster around a few types and a few functions just because we like people like us. So we tend to hire like us. And so it kind of creates this like clustering effect. And we've seen it happen time and time again where there's a section of a team just missing a certain energy and they're scratching their heads going, why aren't we getting the results we want in this way? And this, our small team, why are we having trouble here? Well, often it's one of these cognitive function energies that a person would have represented that's not part of the team. Mm-hmm. And so our encouragement is, hey, go hire somebody that represents this, bring them to the team. I mean, if they got to be competent and have all this stuff, capability to do the job, but then that representation is there to help round out your team. So take that and boil it down to one person.
Yeah.
So you as a person, imagine you're like a team moving through the world. There's 8 of these cognitive functions and there's 8 things that these functions attune to and show us in the world, right? We are attuned to different ones of them. And you're going to be certain and strong on some of them, but some of them just are going to be blind spots. You're not going to think about it at all or see them at all. And so this is a helpful tool we're going to talk about today to identify maybe a blind spot you're not seeing.
Yeah.
So let's jump in. Any other modifications on things I said? I could see you're like calculating ways to...
No, I was just thinking that if we're going to start with the perceiving functions, and you already recommended people go check out the CAR model. So there's 2 different perceiving functions, and each of them have 2 different orientations. The 2 different perceiving functions are sensing and intuition. And sensing basically means an experience. It's understanding and learning the world through direct experience or somebody's direct experience. There's an extroverted version of it, which is me having a direct experience, like me engaging with the outside world and being attuned to it and sort of understanding how reality works because I'm attuned. And then there's the introverted version, which is processing an experience. And when we process our experiences, we review them, we remember them, and we can also borrow them. We can borrow experiences from other people and learn good lessons through their memories, like through what they've been through. So that's introverted sensing. We also call it memory, and extroverted sensing. We also call it sensation. And then there's intuition, which is effectively advanced pattern recognition. It's not necessarily having to have direct experience yourself. It's taking pieces of information and then extrapolating a bigger pattern from it, a meaning or a possibility or another way of looking at, beyond what is that I'm directly engaging with and seeing like a bigger picture.
Basically, I was thinking about this yesterday. Every murder mystery, the person solving that case is typically using pieces of evidence to create a composite of what happened there.
Right.
Using their imagination. Like this probably happened based on the evidence. I can't know it for sure, but I'm going to speculate and guess using my imagination. This is probably the scenario of how this person was murdered.
Exactly. And so there's also two orientations to intuition. There's the outer world orientation, what's called extroverted intuition. And that extroverted intuition is like real-time pattern recognition. So it tends to be faster. And it's more trying to size up a situation quickly in order to understand the next right move. And so that one is like more like brainstorming, more sizing something up and kind of messing with the environment to see how it responds in order to get a quick read on what's really going on here, right? Underneath, maybe beyond what I can see. And then what are the possibilities? Like my imagination, the sky's the limit. So what could be? And then there's an internal orientation or an introverted version. And that's introverted intuition. And that's more about processing intuition. So you get these patterns or this speculation or this imagination inside of yourself, and you run a simulation in order to understand how, like what are the implications of this? If I run this out to its natural conclusion, what does that look like? And is that the most likely way that something will roll out? And how are other people seeing it, and sort of perspective shifting within the self in order to see the simulation from multiple different angles? And that's what we call perspective. So introverted intuition, we call it perspectives, and extroverted intuition, we call it exploration. So these two top orientations of perception, of sensing and intuition, then get broken down into two more categories each. And so you have 4 perceiving functions in total. And those 4 perceiving functions are effectively ways that we can understand time. It's ways that we can just sort of take in information. Anytime we're absorbing information or trying to sort of figure out what's going on here without necessarily judging it for rightness, or trying to take a specific or trying to judge an action. Sometimes we'll take actions with them, but we don't necessarily determine rightness and wrongness from it. It's more just sort of like, what's going on here? That's the ultimate question underneath it.
Yeah, usually it's what we're paying attention to.
Exactly.
Especially with the perceiving functions.
Yep. And we're all pre-wired to pay attention to different things. And so if you're missing one of these, as the insinuation would be, it means you're missing a reality, where you're missing a perception. You're missing what could be going on that you're just not tuned into. And so it's okay to be pre-wired to pay attention to certain things and not others. But if the relevant information is in the thing you're missing, right? Like that's the thing you're not wired to be looking at. If that's where an important piece of information lies, or where you kind of need to see it from that angle in order to get a return, then that's when the problem shows up.
Yeah.
And you're going to experience it, right? You're going to have pain or pressure or some sort of like, why do I keep making the same mistake? Or what am I missing, right? Like that question of what am I missing is a good one to determine that you're probably... The answer is probably a nutrient in your perceiving functions.
So growing up, my mom has INFJ preferences. And I can't tell you how many times she would look down at her thigh or her leg if she was wearing shorts, and she's like, "Where did that bruise come from? That's weird." Like it would be like a line or something on her leg, or she'd have a bruise on her arm, and she'd be confused where it came from. As a child, I started to observe her, and I would watch her like walk through a room and like run in like her leg into a coffee table, go "ow," and then just kind of keep going. Mm-hmm. And I observed like later that day, she'd ask, sure enough, where'd that come from? Like, "Oh, Mom, you ran into the coffee table earlier, remember?" "I did? Oh, well, I guess I wasn't paying attention to that, ... And so I think that's a snapshot of a moment of a person, my mother, a real person, not paying attention to a reality field that she was engaged with, which was the physical, tangible environment she's moving through. As INFJ, she's up in her head and she's patterning and she's thinking and then she's relating to people, but she's not tracking her physicality as much as maybe somebody else would be. And so this is what we're talking about. We're not saying that it's like she has to engage with the real world, right? It's like we're saying she has to move through the world. We're saying she may not be paying attention to the things that she's even directly engaging with in the moment, because it's something that's just not on her radar in that time period.
Yeah, just not registering the significance of it.
Exactly.
Or taking a moment to try to figure out what,
yes.
Is this an important experience for me to track?
So that's what we mean by you might be missing this. It's not like you're not capable to like live in reality with sunlight and like walk through the earth. My mom's was capable of that, but she was incapable of tracking her moment to moment, like bruising and like running into something, because she's up in her head. Now, if it was painful enough, I'm sure she would stop and notice. But, we bump ourselves all the time and we don't even register it half the time. So it was really interesting to me as a kid. So like, I would know where that came from. I I think. Like, that'd be interesting to think. So let's start with that, actually. If you're willing to start with that extroverted sensing process of sensation, because that's really what she was not deficient in, but just not paying attention to. That's the other thing is, we said vitamin deficiencies, but you probably have these available to you. It just may not be something that you're activating. So let's call them like deficiencies, like vitamin deficiency. You need vitamins here, or maybe attunement here as a metaphor or an analogy. But let's talk about the qualitative nature of sensation. Let's jump into this.
So as we mentioned before, as we mentioned about 1 billion times in the podcast and previous podcasts, but if this is your first one, then we'll fillet out a little bit about what the purpose of extroverted sensing is. It's a function that is designed to have you live life fully. That's its actual purpose.
Max aliveness.
That's right. To experience aliveness in your life, to experience flow in your life, to be tuned in, to not let 10 years go by and realize that you've had your head in the sand or you've just been someplace else, that you've been living an imaginary life. Extroverted sensing or sensation is the function that keeps you present and helps you live a full life. And so things that are associated with this function is like, it's a generative function, so it has a lot of energy associated with it. It is a very curious function that wants to experience, newness and have new things in its life that sort of whet its appetite. It's very associated with senses, and so it does have appetites, right? It's not just a matter of living life, but it's also living a pleasurable life and infusing a lot of play into it. And so this is a function that ensures that we are, that we're not so busy we forget to live, right? We're not so attuned to other things that we forget what the point is to begin with. And I think that's why we tend to start with it a lot, is it's a very foundational function. Everything is built on top of it, right? What does it mean to be alive? It means to be alive, right? It means aliveness. And so this is the function that reminds us to tune into aliveness.
I like to call it the eternal now. And in my opinion, it's the only reality we're living. Everything else is a construct. Everything else is an abstraction and an imagination. This is the only thing that is tangible that's happening right now, as far as I can tell. I mean, I don't think tomorrow isn't happening today. Only right now is happening in this moment. Yeah. So it's a very present, and it gives us access to presence. So if we're tuning into this function and we're going to use the metaphor, the analogy of my calf twitching or my eyelid twitching and I need calcium or potassium or something, how will I know that I have a deficiency here? Or how would somebody that's listening or watching right now know, okay, this is probably where I need to put some attention to. My calf muscle is twitching or my eyelid is twitching.
I would say lacking energy or being listless is one of your first symbols that you don't have enough of this function in your life. If you are, if you're easily distracted by things that don't mean anything, that aren't in an engagement with something that you enjoy and reminds you why it's great to be alive. If you are not having frequent experiences around that, and that usually is experienced through a sense of dysthymia or just kind of right? If you feel very meh about life, that means that you are missing this nutrient. It means you need more of it.
I would think an actual calf muscle. This is one function that if your calf muscle or eye is twitching, like literally, not even figuratively, that's actually probably dysfunction too. Like you're actually literally missing vitamins in your life.
Right. Well,
your health isn't good, right? This is where that would live.
Yes. If we are experiencing life through the instrument of our body, then the body will give us feedback that we can improve the instrument itself. And so, yeah, like our health is a piece of this. And tuning into and making sure that we're not just living life fully, but we're living life, again, with like pleasure and with a thriving energy. And so the actual, like understanding where you got that bruise is also related to paying attention to the body. So if I'm hungry, then I should eat. And if I have physical needs that I'm ignoring or neglecting, then I should probably get those attuned. Now, extroverted sensing or sensation might not go handle that immediately because it might not think in terms of safety and security. That's more introverted sensing or memory, and we'll get to that in a moment. That's what's tracking changes over time. So it's like, and it also wants a sense of homeostasis. And so like making sure I'm taking care of my body might be a little bit more of an introverted sensing or memory attunement, but just registering it and understanding that I might have diminished capacity in the instrument that is experiencing life, the body. That's something that extroverted sensing or sensation can give you a feedback mechanism on.
So low energy, listless, possible physical pain or discomfort or lack of general health could be indicators that this is a deficiency. I need to probably attend to this energy of extroverted sensing or sensation if I feel these things.
Yeah. Well, and there are higher quality versions of it in the same way that like potato chips have potassium. So I guess if you're if you're low on potassium, you could go eat potato chips, or you could eat an avocado or a banana, which would be a higher quality, nutrient dense food. There's also higher quality experiences in extroverted sensing than lower quality. And the lower quality ones will just exacerbate the problem. Like a potato chip is not really a sustainable way of ensuring that you get enough potassium in your diet. So living fully might sound, it might feel like indulgences, right? Like if I'm going to live a life of pleasure, I need to be indulgent and making sure that I'm, indulging my senses. But that will actually end up exacerbating the issue. If you indulge too much, then now you're actually breaking the body down, and the instrument of the body can't register positive things either, or it struggles with that. And so as opposed to, just going and eating whatever I want to, or going and having a physical experience that's pleasurable, the higher quality ones are the ones that are generative. So it's like, I need to exercise on a regular basis. I need to make sure that my body understands movement. I need to make sure that I'm treating it well and honoring it in a way where, like when I do have pleasurable experiences, I'm not removing opportunity from me because maybe, like I can't walk far enough in order to take a pleasurable stroll through, the woods that's like, we're all going to go camping this weekend. It's like, oh, I can't go camping because I can't physically manage it. Now, sometimes we have things that happen to our bodies that we can't do anything about. And then we're not talking about that. We're not talking about things that are out of our control. We're just talking about things that are within our control.
Yeah.
And so making sure we get enough vitamin extroverted sensing is making sure that we're honoring the instrument that is having those experiences.
So we teach a course. It's an 8-week course with a live event at the end where we go through all of these cognitive functions, and we help people every week understand their relationship in their actual lived life to these functions. And it's interesting. We start with extroverted sensing because we believe it's the foundation of everything. And I think in our culture, there's not a lot of encouragement to do it outside of very specific applications like bike riding, sports, going to the gym. Like there's these acute versions of it, but we're not like climbing trees or bouldering on rocks often as Western civilization. Like we're mostly staying on very flat surfaces, very organized places to go. Not a lot of physical challenge through where we move and what we do. So we're not getting this naturally. We have to be proactive about it. And when you mention to people on the PLP, the Personality Life Path Mentorship, the poor INJs, INTJs, and INFJs on the first week are like, I think I might have signed up for the wrong course. I feel low energy, and you guys are telling me to do the very thing that I would need energy to do. You're saying that's the solution to low energy. That seems counterintuitive or paradoxical. How am I supposed to? And I know we're spending a little time on extrovert sensing. I don't think we'll spend as much time on all the other perceiving functions, but this one's fundamental. I think we as at least Westerners are missing a huge amount of this right now. Again, it's done in indulgence, overindulgence, and acute like athleticism. Mm-hmm. But there's huge gaps missing, I think, in between those two spaces.
Yeah.
So let's speak to this idea of energy. It seems like you're saying, wait, if you lack energy, do something that you feel requires energy to do. How can we reconcile that?
Yeah, well, the function is generative. And that means that when it gets energy by spending energy. And that's why even though you might come home from the gym tired, it will in aggregate create more energy for you throughout the day on, even on days that you're not working out.
Compounding effects.
Exactly, has compounding effects. So it will give you return on investment in a literal, physical, tangible, bodily way. But I think one of the reasons why it's so generative is because it gives one a taste of freedom. When you talk about our society having these acute expressions, but being uncomfortable with all the other expressions, It's because we have become, at least in our culture, and if you're listening around the world, like you'll have to assess the culture that you're in, but at least in American culture, we have become way, way, way too associated with safetyism. Like off the chart, like in an unreasonable, irrational way. We make love to the concept of safety all the time. We're constantly making sure everything's safe. And because of that,
it's because of litigation culture.
Litigation
lawsuits probably drive this mostly.
Well, and then when you're not used to being around people who take risks or takes chances, you don't know, like you don't have a sense of proportion of what a risk or a chance actually is. Everything feels unsafe. Everything feels risky. And so because of that, we have lost the sort of the energy producing flow that comes with a feeling of freedom. And freedom and safety are there. I mean, I wouldn't say they're entirely antithetical, but they certainly don't occupy the same terrain.
Could we say physical agency?
Sure.
Instead of freedom? I mean, freedom is one aspect of it, but also the agency to be able to do something physical. Mm-hmm. You know, like being able to walk somewhere, do something. It's like I have the agency, like not only the physical agency to the capacity, but the agency to feel permission to do it too.
That's right. Exactly. And there's a lot of energy that comes from a rush of freedom. I think agency is a great word. Sovereignty is another great one. It's like, I want to do that, so I'm going to direct line and go do it. There's a rush, there's a thrill that comes along with those kinds of actions, especially if you've always held yourself to a, you know, like, well, I don't want to worry anybody else. Is a very sort of like, talk about sapping your energy, right? Like, I don't want to worry about anybody else. I don't want to worry them with my erratic behavior. So I don't want to just run and do a cartwheel in front of a whole bunch of people. I'm too old for that. Or I don't want to just go climb a tree. Or I don't want to just go, you know, like, is this socially acceptable? Is this an appropriate thing to do? It kills our libido for life. So libido for life, or a zest for life, comes from self-agency, from sovereignty, from giving ourselves permission to live out loud. And that's where the generative component comes from, I would argue, even more so than just also physically taking care of yourself and making sure that you're not eating the wrong foods or you're getting enough sleep. Like, all those things are important. But I would say it's the rush of freedom that really gives us and produces that energy, that zest for life, the reminder that this is why we're doing whatever it is that we're doing.
That makes sense. I remember as a young person going to a lot of developing countries, didn't have the infrastructure the West had, right? I was multiple countries that had, I mean, tons of poverty. I was with like church groups and teams, and we'd go up into different villages and we would see people living very different than what I was used to. I mean, in conditions that it really opened my eyes to the world. It gave me a lot of compassion for people because I had grown up here in America. I didn't know how people lived, and it was like very eye-opening. But I noticed the pattern almost everywhere we went. People seemed very happy, socially connected to each other, and children would be out like playing soccer, having nothing but laughing and playing. And I think there's a spirit of agency and freedom of movement, and they didn't feel regulated and constricted. So on one hand, they're dealing with mass poverty in like infrastructure and available resource, and it's terrible. Like, some of the conditions were not very good. But another way, they seemed a lot happier than my Western friends here in the United States, who were kind of grumpy and feeling sad and down. And I almost want to draw a correlation to just how much agency people had to not have to think in terms of like being policed by every action that you wanted to take. Mm-hmm. And while you probably don't have the best quality of life with the resource, you certainly have a quality of life of agency, of movement, at least locally at your capacity level. You can't travel overseas or anything. You don't have agency there. Yeah. You don't have resource for it. But with the realm that you're living in, you have a lot of agency in there. And that, I think, is a beautiful thing for people, for the human spirit to be unleashed. Now, I hate the fact that they have to be in poverty for that to be the case. Yeah. But it seems like the more wealthy a country gets, the more agency they lose.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you can kind of see this. Yeah, exactly. It's like, if you're surrounded by nice things, then you don't want anybody behaving erratically, because then they might hurt your nice things. Yeah. And so then you become hyper materialistic. It's like, now it's more about like preserving the nice things than it is about living life and having fun. Yeah. And so I think we become conditioned to think in a hyper or overregulated way. Like, that's a lot of our cultures are overregulated. And so we start to think in an like that's what's the phrase? It's no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. And whenever I think about that Krishnamurti quote, I always think of what has my society given me? I don't think it's profoundly sick necessarily, but I think it has elements of it. And what are the elements of culture that I have imbued into my life that actually discourage me from living to my fullest potential? And maybe it's because introverted sensing or memory, which we'll get to in a moment, is my 3-year-old or inferior function. It became very obvious to me at a certain point that I'm like, oh, I've allowed myself to be propagandized into overregulation. And I don't mean like in a governmental way. I mean like in my life. Like I'm always worried about what other people think. I'm always worried about making sure that I'm doing the appropriate thing. I'm always worried, like I don't want to signal to anybody or telegraph to anybody that I'm too crazy or that I'm not safe or whatever. And at a certain point, I'm like, I'm just overregulating myself into misery. And so the opposite of that is living life fully, is letting somebody else be a little uncomfortable by my behavior. Like, it's not the end of the world. Somebody else's discomfort or uncertainty about my behavior is like neither of us are going to die from that experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We went to the store last night and Piper wasn't wearing a coat. It was cold out. And we enter like the store and I'm like, I say it loudly in front of other adults. I'm like, Piper, you're not wearing a coat. All these adults are going to judge me as a dad that I don't have you in a coat.
Right.
It's like those kinds of things, right?
Yeah.
It's like I'm worried, like, oh no, everybody's going to judge the fact that like my daughter's not in a coat. What if they like...
And they will. They'll make little comments
or
like...
call the authorities on me or something.
Get that baby girl in a coat or whatever. And it's like, listen, she won't wear one. I don't know what to tell you. She's a Bunsen burner. She runs hot. Like she just won't keep one on.
Anyway.
So yeah, but it's like those kinds of things, those little like helpful comments that other people make. And pretty soon you're living your life based on like sort of being curated by other people's helpful comments and not wanting to be judged by them.
Yeah.
And then we go, why don't I have any libido or zest for life? It's like, well, you've been overregulated out of it. And so there's a freedom and a generativeness. And that's why these physical activities that, a lot of times get associated with this function, like jumping out of an airplane or, driving really fast or whatever, like these adrenaline fueled versions of the function. I think that's one of the reasons why they're the go-to expressions is they give you a real sense of proportion.
Yeah.
Like you jump out of an airplane and you're not the same person 100% on the other side as you were when you were like going up in the plane, Like it's just, you just have a different way of seeing things. So I think when you are losing your zest for life, then the vitamin you need is extroverted sensing or sensation. And you do that, just like you need potassium, you go grab a banana. If you need extroverted sensing or sensation, you take direct action.
Direct experience.
Mm-hmm. Or just take a direct action. Like you and I have been trying to train ourselves right now. If we see something in our house that needs to be done, instead of going like, okay, I need to put that on the list, right? Like, oh, I need to take care of that out. Maybe I'll do that this weekend. We're trying to train ourselves right now to go, that needs to be done. I'm going to immediately handle it.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like an attitude of direct action. And then it also compounds on itself.
We're spending a lot of time on extroverted sensing because I think it's important. So I'll just mention one more thing. We can flip over to...
It's okay if we spend a little bit of time on them.
Well, I think you want to talk about a deficiency in a lot. I think everybody struggles with this.
I think
even
so too.
People that have this as a strength are dysthymic sometimes because they have nowhere to express it. Mm-hmm. So I don't think it's just for people that have this more as an uncertainty in their personality. I think even ESFPs and ESTPs, they don't struggle with the function or the capacity of the function. They struggle with the permission when we're talking about the agency of it. Sometimes like, well, I'm not allowed to be who I truly am. Mm-hmm. I'm supposed to go into class and sit still and write on paper. That's not how I'm naturally wired. I want to be up and experiencing life. I don't want to be doing that.
And get medicated if I can't do that.
Like they'll throw you on some drugs to calm you down and keep that locked away. Yeah. So I think it's a challenge for everybody to the point of like direct action and things. Piper and I have wanted to get more physical and more healthy. So we took a card deck and we have it sitting on in the hallway downstairs in our house. And every time we pass, we have to flip a card. If we go through that hallway, flip a card over, whatever number's on the card, we have to do push-ups, pull-ups, sit-ups, jumping jacks, any combination of those up to that number. And I'm noticing we're using, as we pass by, it's like a reminder, oh yeah, I should do a quick exercise. We flip the card, it takes like 2 minutes. We do it real quick, and then now we're exercising throughout the day. And it's a very extroverted sensing sensation way of doing it. I'm not planning it. It's not on a list. It's not a clock time. Mm-hmm. I just so happen to pass by the environment that has the card deck there. And we've been flipping them, and I've noticed that she's been using them too. And so we're now exercising throughout our day without really having a plan for it, which is really cool. It's like an interesting way to unlock this energy as an idea to stimulate, if you're listening or watching, okay, how could I incorporate something like that in my life? How can I use physical cues and markers in my environment? We do a lot of work around this in PLP because, again, I think extroverted sensing sensations work that a lot of people need to do.
Yeah.
And so we talk about how can you set up your environment to give you cues for direct action, to have more life, to have more energy, to be engaged with your environment more, to bring that part of you out. So I think this is really powerful.
Stick your face in the sun for 15 minutes. Go take a walk. Go hop in the car. If you're like, man, I really haven't gotten out of the house in a while, then get your butt in a car and start driving some direction. It's like, go do something. Don't put it on a list.
Yeah.
Take direct action.
While you're thinking about it.
Yeah, while you're thinking about it. And if you feel your life is listless, if you feel like it's lacking energy, lacking libido, well, then get some of that energy in there, right? Like, and sometimes it feels like the setup cost is high. It always does. Whenever we're talking about a function we're lacking, it's like, why am I low on potassium? Because I haven't eaten a banana in a long time. It's like, well, I guess I got to go buy bananas, or I got to go buy avocados. How do I do that? How much, is this a good one? Like, it's like, there's always like all this thought that needs to go into handling something the first time. But then once you have a thing you do, make sure you're doing that thing, right? Not that long ago, I started to get a headache and I was like, I'm going to go get a massage right now. I'm just going to go do it, right? I'm not going to like sit there and go, I wish I could get a massage. I'm like, I'm going to go ahead and go get a massage. And it was even a time where I was like, do I have the money for this in my bank account right now? I was like, I don't care. I'm just going to go do it anyway. And I'll figure it out. And it was great. It was like, it killed my headache immediately. I'm like, that's what I need to do. So it's a matter of giving yourself experiences immediately without a lot of thought. Like, stop overcomplicating things.
Yeah.
We're stripping our nutrient of extroverted sensing by overthinking and overcomplicating. Just take direct action.
Yes. I love it.
Yep.
Let's talk about memory. Introverted sensing. So now this is also sensation, or not the nickname sensation. This is also sensing. I'll say it that way.
Yep.
Because we nicknamed extroverted sensing sensation specifically. This is also a sensing process. So we're still out of the realm of intuition. We're in sensing, but this is not immediate real-time sensing. This is me looking over the memories of what's happened, either to me or to somebody else, and perceiving my world through the differences in the memory chain, basically. That's why we nickname it memory. Mm-hmm. It's not that you have a good memory if you have this mental process. And by the way, extroverted sensing is used by a strength of all SPs in the Myers-Briggs system. Introverted sensing is used as a strength by all SJs in the Myers-Briggs system. Yeah. So let's talk more about memory. How do we know? Well, anything else to flesh out the qualitative nature of this, the qualities of it?
So as we mentioned in the 2-part series, introverted sensing your memory, like the thing it keeps us safe from is repeating the same mistakes over and over and over again. Like, the purpose of it is to make sure that we can look to the past and learn the right lessons. And one of the gifts it gives us, and in fact, we know that we've done it well because this is an introverted function, so it means that we're processing something. And in this case, it means we're processing experiences. So what does it mean to process an experience? It means to get all the gold out of it. It means to derive all the most valuable parts and lessons. And it means making peace, right? Like, when we have this function well represented in our life, we have peace of mind, right? We don't fear looking at our past. We don't worry that we're going to see things back there that we don't like about ourselves, or that it's going to remind us of a terrible time period. When we have plenty of this represented, then we've made peace with the past. We understand the importance of owning it and accepting it. And then it also gives us a sense of rootedness. Like, we know where we came from. We sort of understand that. I think of the movie Moana, where Moana has this like call that she can't deny to go out into the, to go explore the seas. And she can't figure out why she can't stop this part of herself from just desiring it. And then she runs into all these boats from her ancestors that they were like, she's like, oh, we were explorers. That's what we were. That's where I've come from. This is in my blood. This is in my ancestry. And so now it explained this desire she had because she now understood the etymology. Like, she understood that this is, we're voyagers. That's who we are. And a lot of that movie is about identity, but not just identity in the qualities that come from who you are as an individual. it's identity associated with your heritage, right? Where you've come from as a people group, and then how it impacts the individual. So it's a really important function to ensure that we, that we don't forget, right? It's really important to not forget where we came from as individuals and as cultures.
So that's like a big epic type of example. I think another just basic example is, let's say last Christmas, you waited too close to Christmas to buy gifts for your family, and you were scrambling at the last minute, and maybe you didn't get it all done, and you were late on some things. Now, somebody that has as a strength probably wouldn't do that. But you look back and you go, man, okay, next year I'm going to start a week earlier. I looked and saw that when I started too late, that was a bad result. I couldn't get it done in time. Next year I might make a change. So tuning in and tracking what has happened before helps us actually make changes for the future. That's the thing. That's the key about this. If we can accept what happened and we can say, okay, it was bad. I didn't get that gift for that one person. I go ahead and accept that. And that'll help me make a change to do better next time. It enables us to actually do things, on a better timeline. It gives us refinement, but we have to look and see what actually happened and accept that it happened. And if you deny, no, it was fine. Last minute was fine. It's okay. And you deny that, or you maybe reframe it, or you move away from accepting the fact, no, that was painful. That was hard. That was challenging. And by fully accepting that, now you're able to make the change to do it earlier or to adjust something to have a better result. I think it really came about in like farming culture, probably. Like, well, if I don't put the seed in the ground early enough in the season, I'm not going to have the crop in time. And we probably as humans learn that over time. Like, I have to get it in the ground by this date, whatever the seasonal thing is in the world they were using at the time, or it's not going to happen. And this is a understanding we had. And in order to make the changes to plant it earlier or adjust that, we have to know what the precedent has been.
Yes.
So it really helps us, I think, understand longer timelines.
Yeah.
If extroverted sensing or sensation helps us in the present moment, this helps us in the over time moments.
Yes.
And it really tracks those changes. So it sees the differences, and then we're able to go from that as a basis.
Right. And based on that understanding, awareness, and love of continuity.
Yes.
Then the continuity means that we're also going to honor taking right action on a regular basis. In fact, we're going to find it calming. It's going to be nice to have a routine. It's going to be nice to have a rhythm. It's going to be nice to kind of find ourselves like sort of doing the same thing over and over when it's right action in order to maintain a sense of stability and status quo. And so introverted sensing or memory is also what we do in order to ensure our survival. And we know it because we have a sense of homeostasis. We know we're in a good space because we have a sense of safety, right? We're not just we're not just surviving. We now have the opportunity to thrive because we're taking right action over and over and over and over again. It's almost like sort of the way we try to set ourselves up for success. So how do we know if we're missing it, right? What are the pain points that tell us that we are missing the vitamin of introverted sensing or memory? Well, the first one is anxiety. If this function helps us have peace of mind, then if you struggle with anxiety, you are probably you don't have enough of this. And it's not just generalized like social anxiety. It's more like just sort of an anxiety of life. It's like, am I safe? The constant and perpetual question of, am I safe? Right? Am I going to be okay? Am I going to be okay? Am I going to be okay? And it's like, well, if you review the situations that you found yourself in and you're never sure if you're going to be okay, right? Like, it's actually a sign that you don't have high quality enough introverted sensing or memory. It's there's a vigilance for disruption that the function has. It has its fingers, or like sort of its antenna out to make sure that things are not disrupting these good patterns and habits that we've set up. But the patterns and habits in your life should be serving you, right? Like, they should be things that are making you feel more settled, more rooted, more grounded, more centered. They shouldn't make you worry that you're taking wrong action all the time, or, oh God, what's going to come next? It's like, no, it's kind of like, well, if I built up for retirement, I mean, I guess I could have somebody like, scam me out of it, or I could have a fraud situation where, like it's gone in the next day, or maybe the currency system of my country, or the currency we use could, fall and now it's all worthless. I mean, I guess some of these big things could happen, but barring any massive, sort of disruptive disaster, I know that if I keep putting a little bit of money every month in, right, I'm going to have a retirement built up.
Yep.
And so I'm taking the right action. So I have the peace of mind of that. So if you're feeling anxious all the time and you have a really hard time like falling asleep at night, it might be this function that you need more of.
I would also say that if you're unaware of the habits you have running, you probably need more of this in your life. Because it's my belief that we're all creatures of habits. We're all living in a habit way. Every day we're doing the same thing we did yesterday, most likely. And so, but a lot of us are unaware of those habits. Like we're doing the same behaviors over and over again, and we don't even know we're doing. We're unconscious of that. So I know we sometimes talk about like, well, if your good habits are disrupted, but also if you're unaware of even bad habits or habits that aren't serving you, bringing those into awareness, I think would be giving this nutrient. Like this would be having this nutrient in your life. And if it's deficient, you're not going to know how your habits are not serving you. You're not even going to be aware of the habits that you're living in a repetitive way. I think that's a big one, at least for my life.
Yeah, for sure.
When I tune in.
Yeah. So if you're like, it's like if you've ever asked the question, like, why does this keep happening to me? Right? Why does this keep happening to me over and over? The answer is, well, you haven't done enough introverted sensing or memory to mine out what's going on, right? Like you haven't done enough review in order to say, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different outcome. One would think introverted sensing or memory would encourage a person to do the same thing over and over, but that's not the case. That's like the extroverted sensing or sensation version of like overeating or overindulging. Like there's a version of it that does that, but that's not the nutrient. That's the potato chip version.
Yeah.
The potato chip version of introverted sensing or memory just does the same thing over and over because it doesn't want to think about it. But the nutrient dense version of it goes back and reviews these experiences and makes sure it takes the right lessons and makes sure it understands what it means to the individual. Like, what is the meaning of that experience for me? And how can I include it in my life story? Like how do I include it in my definition or how I see myself in these experiences and how I reacted and responded to them and how they impressed upon me, right? I like the phrase that the past is the crucible in which we were forged. So how do you have a connection to that? Do you understand how your past is part of who you are now? And if not, I mean, one of the ways that we might be feeling, the sort of the muscle twitch or whatever is this sense of displacement, right? Like I don't really understand where I fit in all of this. I don't really understand, like these parts about myself that I have a hard time tamping down, or these aspects of myself, and then come to find out, it's part of my heritage, right? If you don't have some tether to your cultural heritage, no matter where that came from, then you probably are missing some important introverted sensing or memory information, some vital information about yourself. And so there's a anxiety that gets produced. There's a sense of uncertainty about whether or not one is taking right action, but there's also a sort of what is this all about? Like, what is the point of all of this? And while lots of different functions can answer that question in satisfyingly in different ways, the way that introverted sensing or memory answers it is, well, because this is where you came from. These are the shoulders upon which you've stood. This is your heritage. This might be in your DNA. This might be in your blood, not just in your in like the traditions of the culture that you grew up in.
So maybe we could say, like, if we had to boil down extroverted sensing sensation to like a word, it's like presence or experience in a way. And in the memory process or introverted sensing, repetition seems to be a word that's standing out to me. Repetition in that your good habits you're going to repeatedly do them, like put small amounts of money away every week for your retirement, or brush your teeth twice a day, or there's like these, basic habits and advanced habits that you will do on a repetitive way. But also how there's deficiencies, you go, this challenge keeps happening over repetitively, or this relationship I keep creating repetitively, or with different people, I keep having similar repeating things happen over and over again that I don't like.
Yeah.
It's like repetitive is where you tune into to know that you have a deficiency here, to say something's off because I keep having this happen. So I need to review what is going on and almost look at the history of it. Like, oh, and you can probably see some connections in how you've been living of why you keep having these same results over and over again. And it's an adjustment to your your lived habits
Yeah.
in a way.
And you can extend it past that. I mean, I know we're talking about it on an individual level, and I keep harping on this heritage level, but
Sure.
and I think I've mentioned this in the podcast at some point, but I read a million years ago, so I'm not sure what the source is, but I remember reading that if somebody in your heritage and your ancestry experienced famine for, I believe, approximately 4 generations after, the children of the person who experienced famine, those people will have a harder time losing weight.
They'll struggle
to lose weight because their bodies are storing fat in case another famine happens, up to 4 generations. So that's
the
like
DNA remembers.
Yeah.
Wow.
Or whatever it is. I don't know if the RNA or DNA or which part, but like whatever it is inside of us that goes, oh, that was really bad. We should probably plan for that. It's almost like your DNA remembered.
It's like the most introverted sensing thing ever.
Yeah.
Like it passes just from generations.
Yeah. So like you get 4 generations later and the person's like, why can't I lose weight? why am I struggling?
Yeah.
And the answer could be in your past. Now, I'm not saying everybody who struggles to lose weight has had at some point in our past, we all had an ancestor that went through a time period of famine, like 100% of us. And they didn't die before they procreated. So all of us have this someplace in the past. But when I read that, I was like, what else gets trapped in there? What else gets communicated through these little bits of code that communicate? Like, this is how evolutionary adaptation happens too. It's like, oh, we should probably account for this thing, this anomaly. And so how long does it account for that anomaly? Who knows? And what kind of anomalies is it accounting for? Well, we're just learning those kinds of things. So it's like if you have questions about your present, sometimes the answers are found in the past. And so I think it's not like you have to become somebody who's like now super into, ancestry.com or anything, but but sometimes there's like value in there in just remembering that a past orientation it's not a waste of time. I have seen so many people believe that, like, don't judge me by my past. I don't live there anymore. Or like the past is just a waste of time. Or like the future is all that matters. And it's like, kind of, but you're missing this entire chapter. Like not just chapter, but chapters of your life. You're like forgetting all sorts of information, everything that led up to now. That's all your etymology. Like that's that's the known, right? And there's going to be valuable information in there, which is why we have sayings like those who do not know history are doomed to repeat it, which I see a lot of actually. I think we have I think we've scraped the safetyism out of introverted sensing or memory, but then forgotten all of its useful lessons otherwise. Like the only thing that we really want, in the same way that we have created these acute experiences for extroverted sensing or sensation, where it's like you're allowed to do it at the gym, but you're not allowed to do it like, in a parking lot or whatever. Like, don't skateboard in a parking lot. That could be dangerous. And it's like, okay, cool your tits. It's going to be fine. But it's like it's like we're only allowed to have these acute experiences. I feel like we've done something very similar with introverted sensing or memory, where it's like we're allowed to be like hyper safety oriented. That's okay. But really getting into what our past means for us as individuals, well, now that's not okay. For some reason that's like, that's a waste of time. It's like, well, that's where the meat is. That's where the actual good stuff is. This idea of, just being totally obsessed with safety, that's the potato chip version, right? But you're basically eating the nutrient version of potato chips if you are totally obsessed with safety. That's not what introverted sensing or memory is about. It's a distortion of the function. So if you're experiencing anxiety, if you're experiencing question marks about like kind of why you're like your current purpose or your current like sort of like who am I and where did I come from? You're needing more of this nutrient.
So we spent a lot of time on the 2 sensing functions.
Sensing functions, that's right. We kept saying we'll make it shorter later, but
originally we were gonna plan this as a 2-part. Maybe they just need to expand this to a 4 parts. We give it so we don't take like 2 hours for each of these sets. We can kind of unpack it. So you want to?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
You want to bounce now, come back, and then we can pick up on the next episode.
Yeah, absolutely.
The intuition parts.
Yep.
Okay. So I guess what else do we need to say about the 2 sensing processes before we can wrap up this episode, and we'll go to the next one right afterward.
Well, just remember that the name of the game for the sensing functions is having an experience. And for introverted sensing or memory, the thing we didn't talk about is that you can borrow experiences from other people. Like you don't have to have lived it yourself. This is why biographies are powerful. This is why we learn from other people's models. And that's fine too. And sometimes the introverted sensing or memory we need is, it's like somebody else already represented it. We can learn the right lessons from somebody else's experiences. But when it comes to both of these functions, or just this idea of including some of this, there are going to be types that really dislike using either, using these functions. There are going to be some types that are pre-wired to just no, I just don't want to do that thing. And if that's you, if we're talking about extroverted sensing or sensation or introverted sensing memory, and you find yourself just having kind of a knee-jerk response to not liking that, that's okay. You don't have to become a master of it. Like we said before, you don't have to like double down and just eat avocados all the time now that you need potassium. But you need to have some of it in your life, right? You need to have just enough so that it's not creating a problem, just enough so that it's represented in your quote unquote diet. So for extroverted sensing or sensation, it's direct action. Whatever that means, just figure out a way to take direct action. For introverted sensing or memory, it's a willingness to sit with the past. And sometimes that can be hard to do. So we recommend things like, you can call them totems, right? Souvenirs from the past. What are objects in your home that you've kept for years and years and years? And most people have gone through their, like the things in their home and gotten rid of stuff, right? Like, let's say you've spent, you're in midlife and you've moved, who knows, 3 to 5 times in your life. And every time you move, there's this one thing that you always keep. You always put it in the box. Why? Why don't you ever get rid of that object? So maybe pick up an object like that and just ask yourself, what's the meaning of this? Why do I have an attachment to this thing? Or listening to music from when you were young and in high school, and it helps kind of wash back some of those memories. Or just creating a timeline of your life on all the most important events and what those things meant and what they taught you. Or maybe doing a bit of an ancestry.com type of thing, right? Kind of charting your heritage, your ancestry, both sides of your family. Where did they come from? Any of these things, they don't have to be complicated, right? Like they don't have to be difficult. They can just be exercises that you do to tap into the energy of it and see if it doesn't give you a little bit more sense of self, a little bit more sense of where you came from and why that's important to you. And so you just eat the one avocado, right? That's okay. Just eat the one. Just make sure you have it represented.
This is the kind of stuff we do in our Personality Life Path mentorship. We spend a lot of time every week dialing in and triangulating how you would do one of these exercises that Antonia said specifically for your life. So everybody that's in the group, we tune into their life specifically and we say, okay, for you, we think it would be better for this exercise because of your personality type, because every personality type is different. So to understand our relationship with this, it's really wonderful to see different personalities attempt these exercises in life and see how different the results are. Mm-hmm. And how much some of them are just like, I never knew I was missing this. This is wonderful to have this in my life now. I see the benefits. I'm learning so much about it and watching that over 8 weeks. So if there's an opportunity for you to join the Personality Life Path mentorship at the time of this recording, as you're listening to this, love to have you be part of that, because I think this is where you can go deeper into these aspects of your life. Now that's a pretty big program. It's pretty deep. It goes into shadow work. It's a depth level program. We're not playing around there. Yeah. And sometimes people aren't ready for that. It's not the right timing or something. So the other thing I could direct you to is our owner's manuals for all the 16 personality types. So we've got one for all the 16 Myers-Briggs types. There's one for your personality type. And it will get you started on the journey for some of these things we're talking about, setting up an ergonomic life for yourself, understanding the things you're going to show up with uncertainty around, and the other things you're going to be maybe over certain about. And there's a translator part of you. There's part of you that you can develop, we call it the co-pilot, that can actually help you self-parent, help give you guidance. And it's accessible to every personality type. It's a little different for everybody, but it's accessible to all of us. And yet we don't activate it as humans. And me and Antonia are beating the drums, like, activate this, develop this part. It's a wonderful part that can help overcome the uncertainties you have, set the boundaries in your life you want to set, get the outcomes and the goals and the things you desire in life, and really set your life up and operate yourself from a place of understanding and movement forward. So I really recommend either Personality Life Path or the owner's manuals for your type.
And then next week, we'll talk about the intuitive functions.
Yeah.
And how those...
Yeah. And while you're at the website enrolling in Personality Life Path mentorship over at personalityhacker.com, or you're getting an owner's manual, under this podcast, you should leave a comment, ask a question, or share your story. What's coming up for you as we talk about these quote unquote vitamin deficiencies in the two sensing processes? Do you sense these? Do you notice this in your life? Are you missing one of these energies? We'd love to hear, maybe you're missing it. Maybe you've reconnected to it. Maybe you have it overrepresented, underrepresented. Love to hear your story about your relationship to these two functions.
Yeah. And if you enjoyed the podcast, you can subscribe to us on iTunes right. Apple Podcasts actually now. It's no longer iTunes. That was an old script in my head that just popped up. Apple Podcasts and various Android platforms, including Spotify. And if you leave a rating and review under Apple Podcasts, well, that makes me warm and fuzzy and lets us know that somebody's listening and helps us keep going. You also might be watching us on YouTube because we have a video podcast. And if you're there, you can subscribe, and you can hit the bell to let you know when future episodes come out.
Yeah, my name is Joe Mark Witt.
And I'm Antonia Dodge.
And we'll talk with you on the next Personality Hacker Podcast.